The government has just forgiven billions in student debt. Do you think that's going to increase demand for student housing? Watch this video to find out if it's the right commercial real estate investment for you. Ron from Ron Rory Law, and in this video we're going to talk about student housing. Now, I've gone in depth in some of my prior videos, but this video is really going to break down what it is, what the strengths of student housing are, what the disadvantages are, what to look for in making this investment, and how to decide whether it's the right type of residential investment for you. Ron from Ron Rory Law, and if you follow this channel, you know that I like to drink whiskey. So today we've got a new Harozaki there. I'm going to drop some opinions in the comments if anybody is watching this video. Let's get started. Let's talk about student housing. Generally, what is this? And I think this property type has evolved a lot over the years, because traditionally student housing was thought of as kind of dormitory, shared bathrooms, a shared kitchen. You might have housekeeping services. They were generally small, unattractive rooms. And that's it. You know, they just had proximity to a campus, and then they would shove a lot of students in there and call it student housing because students, you know, wanted to spend as little as possible. Now, that has changed a lot, and especially over the past 5 to 7 years, student housing has become kind of a catch-all for any type of multifamily, multi-unit housing that is catering primarily to university students. And when I say university, for my non-US friends, it's undergraduate studies, your postgraduate. This is undergraduate is years 1 through 4. Student housing now has evolved to become just really any type of multifamily that caters to this type of population. This is a younger demographic, but they want amenities. They're used to having a luxury, and while this is their first time away from home, they're not afraid to spend a lot of money on a nice building. Now, some of the nuances are going to be, again, proximity to campus. Whether they go to class or not, that is going to be a selling feature, is the proximity to campus. Can you walk to classes? Can you walk to different buildings? Is there a shuttle, right? If you can't walk there, is there a daily shuttle? Is there a shuttle to other parts? How safe is that waiting area? How consistent does it run? But all in all, it's still going to be a large component of multifamily amenities. You're going to have a swimming pool. You may have laundry facilities. It's typically not going to be in the unit. But that's what student housing has evolved. And it's really incredible to see some of these buildings come out. Lazy rivers, they've got sand volleyball courts. It's really quite amazing to see the amenity-rich features. Then they still are only offering 9-month leases. They may offer a room rental option, but that's what student housing is. Let's talk about the main advantages, right? I think that the number one advantage is it's recession-proof. Students are always graduating every year, whether it's 2008, 2010, 2020, 2020. Students are always graduating, and there will be some percentage that go to college. And the number of students and the enrollment numbers is really just going to depend on the local university, how well they do at attracting and encouraging students to sign up for the school. But at the end of the day, the demand is always there. It is a very strong chronological part of the American culture, which is you graduate from high school and you go to college. So assuming that you have a college that has strong enrollment, it's a large public school, something like that, you're going to have constant demand for your premise. Now, the rents may change, but you're going to have demand, and people want to rent at your facility. Number two is that stability. A lot of these students, they don't have qualifying credit. They don't have a job history. They don't have income. They may not have savings. And so because of that, it's very common that you're going to have a personal guarantor on the lease, which is typically a parent or maybe a relative. That person is a very strong guarantor, and in many cases that guarantor on the lease is stronger than tenants in normal buildings. So let's say you're in a Class B regular apartment in Dallas, your tenants are not as strong as the guarantor on a student housing lease. And I say that it's just generally true, but you're renting to the guarantor. The strength of that application is really based on the parental or the relative's personal guarantee of that lease. So that makes it very strong. So you've got strong demand, you've got strong tenants, And finally, these are people that are continuing to grow. Now, despite some of the concerns about declining enrollment, that's really very local. But in general, students continue to come to university. We've had record numbers of enrollment over the last 10, 20 years. And foreign increases are also very popular, where we have foreign students coming into the US. So all of these contribute to a very positive environment for student housing if it's a right fit for you. Now, let's talk about some of the drawbacks. These are new renters. So I think that while there's definitely a party conception, these kids are going off to school. It's the first time they're away from home. They're going to throw parties. They're going to damage the unit. There's going to be a lot of water damage and just irresponsible use of the facilities, the fixtures, appliances, yada, yada. I think that is a real risk. You cannot instruct your first-time tenants who have maybe never lived in an apartment by themselves to maintain the dishwasher and not to, quote, overload the dishwasher. You may have to give more explicit instructions. So in that regard, this is kind of just a general drawback of student housing is I do think you need to be a little bit more hands-on, both from a manager's perspective, a management, property management, as well as the owner. You're going to want to make decisions that fit this type of more hands-on tenant base. I'll give you an example. One of my clients has student housing here in Dallas, and one of the things that they complain about is just the frequency of questions. And it's questions from the tenant, it's questions from the guarantor. And in general, they're asking more questions than the average tenant. Again, directly because they're not as experienced. The personal guarantor may not have done this before, and so they ask a lot of questions like, am I allowed to go into the unit? Can I get an extra set of keys? And the property manager, if they're not properly set up and confident enough to say no, or they don't have instruction from the owner, they're going to pass those requests over to you. And so it can get very tedious when you have somebody who's moving in that doesn't really know what this process is like. So you really have to go a little bit above and beyond to help them transition to your units. Again, I think the potential damage is related to potential liability. I think as direct real estate owners, we're all very concerned about the risk for parties and bodily injury and maybe even death. Do college students cause more damage? I think yes, for minor wear and tear because they're not as careful, but no in the sense of major catastrophic damage. And what I mean by that is catastrophic is typically like flooding a unit and fire. Those are the two biggest issues that we see, but I haven't noticed, and this is just my anecdotal observations, that student housing is any more expensive to insure or that has a higher frequency of catastrophic damage. It has a little bit more wear and tear, but that's sometimes just a function of the increased number of unit tenants living in the unit. So if you have a 3-bedroom that you're renting out, you're going to get a lot of 2 residents in a 3-bedroom in a normal apartment. In college housing, you're almost always going to have 3 occupants and maybe 4 occupants in a 3-bedroom. So that's just going to cause more regular wear and tear in general. But the liability, I don't think is necessarily true in terms of massive destruction and ripping out plumbing and destroying bathtubs. That is, I think, just an unfounded rumor. What should you consider to decide if student housing is right for you? Well, I really like student housing if you are located near a college town. If you have some type of connection to a university, again, whether that's a kid in school that can drop by on the property, whether that's a student in school that can live and rent one of the rooms in your rental. So I think it's a good fit for people that do still have a tie to the university. If there is proximity or if they have an affiliation with that school, it can provide a good excuse to do an out-of-state rental or something a little bit far away. So that's who it's good for. It's also a little bit of a hybrid. We talk about degrees of active work needed. And I think on the one hand, you have an absolute triple net, freestanding retail Starbucks. That's about the most passive real estate investment that you can have. That's direct real estate. And on the other hand, you have something like an Airbnb with daily turnover, that you're doing the cleaning yourself. That's the most active side. Or self-storage, student housing. These things are kind of in between. So if you're looking for a little bit higher return than just a pure play long-term single-family rental, student housing does provide a little bit of a bump. You're able to charge a little bit more of a premium. You have to deal with 9 versus 12-month leases, so it can be a little bit complex to manage that cash flow. But if you are that type of person that can find tenants, that has a student or a friend or a neighbor in that university, and you can kind of get some assurances of rent or local management, that's who student housing is really perfect for. On the flip side, too, I'd say it's perfect for somebody that believes in the area, that believes in the long term. You can always scale in student housing and make tons of money. But that kind of advice is true for any type of asset class. I guess I focus this, who is it right for? If you want to dip your toe and have 1 or 2 units, you're going to need some other factor to make it worth your while, because it is a little bit more work. It is not as straightforward as some long-term or short-term rentals that are just very common. Student housing is a little bit of a niche, but it is a focus that deserves attention. If you're watching this video and you're thinking about how to get higher than your 3 to 4 to 5% returns, how could I go get 9? How could I go get 10 while still having long-term leases in place without jumping to short-term or medium-term rentals like corporate or Airbnb, VRBO? So that's it for this short video on student housing. What is it? Who is it for? What are the pros and cons? So smash that like button if you found this helpful. Subscribe if you like the content, and contact the law firm for a free consultation today.